None. Switching to those in favor. Slater Beckerman, is that a firm? What? Left? Stuart Beckerman, just put down Slater, okay. John Napolitano, Mechanic. Nathan Rich. Robin Kramer, I don't see her. Eric Toro.
He's gone.
Gone. Switching to those opposed. Willie Zambrano. Jane McPrody. Jonathan Gasal. Community Board 2. Linda Escanas. Here? Okay. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Linda Escanas, the North Shore Waterfront Greenway on Staten Island, Four-Borough Neighborhood Preservation Alliance, West Brighton Restoration, and Richmond Terrace Conservancy. The proposed zoning text amendments have really nothing to do with affordable housing. The entire city, as you must know, voted against both of them, and almost every community board in all the boroughs of New York. There was a huge turnout of members of the public who adamantly rejected both of these amendments. Both community board members and other New Yorkers have totally rejected these amendments. It is said that they only benefit the real estate developers and seem to be written by REBNY, the Real Estate Board of New York. Any zoning amendment must benefit our great city and not bring harm to it. Hard fought for protections for our neighborhoods and for our city are swept away by these amendments, from old law tenement reforms to recent destructive overdevelopment, etc. New York City, the greatest city in the world, is a city of historic neighborhoods and must be a place of intelligent planning so that we can have the magnificent future that we must have. There is an urgent need for city planning to work with communities. The destructive 1961 zoning on the Northwest Shore waterfront on Staten Island has caused the economy to collapse, created public health traffic hazards, destroyed people's homes and Americans' greatest asset, waterfront access, and our heritage. This is what needs to be immediately addressed, and this is what will create a great future. Forcing dangerous industrial zones on once thriving communities where people live and destroying them further by allowing this dangerous zoning to block our waterfront must never be allowed. We want to work with city planning to create a great New York. Each community is different. It's impossible to have one rejected, destructive plan forced on our great city that doesn't want it. We are part of a we are a city of great historic neighborhoods that everyone wants to be a part of. We must work together to save the identity of New York. City planning must work with New York. I just wanted to say something about small owners. There was something that was said earlier that was kind of chilling, and that was about tenant protections. And it just reminded me of around 1984 when so many small owners lost their homes because they were taken from them. I don't know if you remember that, but you should. And it was the small owners who in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s saved New York by going into crime-ridden areas and going into these beautiful houses, which were a disaster, and saving them with their own hands. This is what saved New York and are now the most beautiful neighborhoods. In any case, nobody really wants this. I mean, we're talking about the community boards and the hundreds of people that showed up in each community board, and you should know that. It's not going to work. It's senseless. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Eskinos. Questions? Thank you. Zach Weinstein? Okay, switching back to those in favor. The next three speakers, Jay Marcus, Quinn Raymond, and Susan Gass. Any of them here? Who? Quinn Raymond. Okay.
Am I the last speaker?
No, by no means. We have hours to go here.
I'm
so
both
go ahead, Mr.
relieved
Raymond.
and I feel sorry for you guys. I'm sorry. My name's Quinn Raymond. I support the MIH and ZQA proposals. I was born and raised in a rent-stabilized tenement on the Lower East Side. 5 years ago, I moved to Brooklyn Heights to the Historic District. That was a bit of a culture shock. Over the years, working, if any of you have been to either of those places, it's a little different. But over the years, working and now just volunteering in grassroots activism, I've seen a lot of battles between local communities and the city and developers, as I'm sure you all have, more than I have. And most recently in Brooklyn Heights, we've seen an extremely determined group of NIMBYs trying to block a new library project. But then also at the same time in Brooklyn Heights, we've seen this fiasco with this Brooklyn Bridge Park project with the, I think it's called the Pier House, where there was an agreement with the community and the local electeds that they were going to build it this high, and they built it that high. And I think that both of those are indicative of the same problem and maybe some of the resistance that has been encountered here, which is that there's no trust between the community and developers. And when the community and local electeds sit down with developers to win concessions on a case-by-case basis with upzoning, there's zero enforceability often, right? So you sit down, you hash out a deal, and the developers may or may not actually follow that deal. It's an MOU, it's a handshake, it's not necessarily a binding agreement. And so people in the community become very distrustful because there's very strong incentives for developers to ignore those agreements. And this is the status quo of community engagement again and again and again. And obviously some part of this is you guys cleaning up the mess from the last administration and the one before that, where promises would be made and then broken. And it's, I think, very frightening and aggravating to be a member of a community and know that when you sit down to negotiate, it's not necessarily always in good faith when you're talking to a developer or in the past with the city. So, you know, these local politicians and the developers have huge incentives for abuse, and there's no enforceability. To that end, the value I see in mandatory inclusionary housing is that it's not another one-off concession at a single site. It's not between a single local elected and a developer. It's not between this guy and that guy. It's not a handshake with spit on it. It's not an MOU. It's an enforceable aspect of zoning. But it's only enforceable in theory, right? Someone has to actually enforce it at some point. So I'm hoping that this is the foundation for a situation moving forward where people do what they say they're going to do. And I have to say that as a transit and a walkability advocate, I support the focus on transit-oriented development that you guys have put into this. I really deeply appreciate that, and the elimination of parking requirements for affordable projects. I wish you would eliminate all parking requirements, and I can't say that emphatically enough and with enough passion. I know you get a lot of crazy NIMBYs all over the city who want to protect parking. It's completely insane. This is a very old, backwards way of thinking. Please, 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 any opportunity you have to get rid of these mandatory parking requirements, get rid of them. They are a blight on the city. They are reducing affordability. They suck. They're horrible. Stop. Please stop it. I'm sorry, I just want to bring a little passion to that issue because I think most of the people who speak about that know a lot more about it than I do. But I think a lot of the people who are supportive of these parking requirements are very passionate and very crazy. So I want to be crazy and passionate too, and let you know that not everyone thinks that way. And I just want to wrap up by touching on the burden placed on our infrastructure by these upzoning proposals. So those concerns are real, and I think that they're reasonable. And a lot of these concerns focus around the schools and the overcrowding of schools and the mass transit and the overcrowding with mass transit that we're experiencing with the highest ridership in the modern history of the system. So I'll just wrap up final couple of sentences. The funding that the federal, state, and city provide for the MTA is a joke. It's an embarrassment. I know you guys can't do anything about that from where you're sitting, but until that mass transit bottleneck is addressed, it's going to really be hard to get reasonable people in the community to be supportive of upzoning. And I think that's the same with the overcrowding in the schools. These are actually legitimate concerns. And I know they're not necessarily your purview in this instance, but they're going to be political barriers. But I just want to stress I really support this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Raymond. I will just say one comment, which is I think you identified the essence of mandatory inclusionary housing, regardless of how one feels about its various components. The essence of it is to provide a degree of predictability, a degree of transparency, and to try to limit, if not avoid altogether, the one-off deals that have been such a typical product of our past 25 years.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Any questions to Mr. Raymond? Thank you.
Apparently, Jay Marcus, one of the names you called, is here.
Oh, he is? Oh, okay. Susan Gass, she here? No. Jay Marcus is here? After all. Welcome, Mr. Marcus.
Hi. Actually, I was coming from a meeting where I was hearing the other side of the parking issue. And the community board that's a little concerned about some of the proposals here. But I'm here on behalf of Fifth Avenue Committee. We're a nonprofit community development agency that focuses on promoting social justice and economic justice. We do that through our programs in job training, adult literacy, community organizing, and affordable housing. And I'm actually here to support a lot of the provisions of the ZQA because we're dealing with projects where when we read it, we were kind of like, yes, this is what we need to help get these projects to happen. I also did want to express, because I've sat through 2 of the community board presentations that your staff has done on MIH and on ZQA, and it's extremely impressive. And I really think if there's any chance that this is going to pass, as I hope and think it will, it's really because of the talent and skill of the CPC staff, both in able to explain these difficult concepts to communities and also understanding the community concerns and seeking to address it. And some of the modifications that have already been done, I think, reflect that. And my guess is after today, you may have a couple more.
Thank you for that. On behalf of the staff, which really did do an amazing outreach effort here, but thank you.
They were very good. But we are long-term advocates for both mandatory and permitted affordability, so we're glad it's in most of it, and we hope you'll put it in the senior. And so we're very pleased to see the city is moving ahead on this effort. I wanted to kind of raise, just so you saw from a nonprofit developer standpoint, why ZQA can offer us a lot of the tools we need. So 2 of the projects we're doing, because we're doing 100% affordable housing, one, we're putting a health clinic on the first floor. The other will be coming before you with ULURP later on, is going to have a library on the first floor. Both of those require those higher ceilings on the first floor, and that 5 additional feet would really mean that we don't have to have our residential ceilings a lot lower than we want for a 100% affordable project. We want to treat the people with respect. One of the projects we're doing is a senior project, and I was kind of surprised because we actually fought to get larger studio apartments over 450 square feet for our average studios, and larger one-bedroom apartments. And yet, because of the unit density count, we actually had to cut back on the number of units that we could have otherwise had on that site. On that site, another feature that we're very glad to have in here is a lot of the creativity that you have when you're in a contextual area. So this is a place where we're adjacent to a very nice brownstone block, but we want to kind of maintain a lot of what's good about that block. And two things in ZQA would help us promote that. One is for the 25 feet that are adjacent, in addition to meeting the setback, the height requirements, we are wanted to set back the building to be contextual with those setback townhomes. But when we do that, it's requiring our setback to unfortunately be, as you know, against the actual building line instead of building lot line instead of at the building. And so it's causing a hardship for us in terms of losing some of the square feet we want to use to develop. Also, it's one of those brownstone blocks that has a lot of those circular references. And while our architect did a great job of putting on the top floors, we would love to have more of it on the lower floors. And what's in the ZQA to allow for within 12 inches, 1 foot, to allow a little more creativity there is one of the things that is going to enable us to think more creatively if that goes through. We also wanted to, well, I think actually those may be the major ones. Other ones, though, that we're looking at another project where we're going to be a joint venture, and it's an extension of a 202, which is something I think you'll be seeing more of, where we're doing a building that's going to be adjacent to existing 202. Aging in place is very important. So the provisions that allow for non-residential uses on higher floors are ones that are very important for us, and we're very pleased to allow it. I did want to just quickly mention, though, two other features that are important for Fifth Avenue Committee. One is when you heard about earlier from A&HD, that having some of them units at 30% of median is going to be very important. Section 8 is the only way because the rents don't afford maintenance and operating costs. And when we're doing 100% affordable, we really can't afford to have rents at 30% and subsidize the maintenance operating costs. When you have mixed income, things that are 75, 80% or 70% affordable, it allows, and with the rest market, it enables a little more of that cross that you can get to rents below 30% of median. We also want to hear what you heard from Gail Brewer earlier, as well as the community board. That's very important for us, is even though we really admire how much the mayor's office has put into anti-displacement efforts, we really think something in the zoning for anti-displacement will be needed as well. We've seen
Thank you.
extensively in North Park Slope substantial loss of rent-stabilized housing as a result of harassment.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Marcus. Any questions to Mr. Marcus? Thank you. Okay, the next four speakers are Victoria Hillstrom, Alyssa Bishop, Elizabeth Eli, and Harry Schwartz. And you are? Aha, welcome. Sure, we'll take it. Thank you.
My name is Victoria Hillstrom. I'm here to represent the loft tenants. Our address is 385 Greenwich, AKA 71 North Moore. These are our lofts since 1982. We're across the street from the Greenwich Hotel. Our lofts are everything in the photos except for the 1,090 square feet in the ground floor of 385 Greenwich. Our lofts are both buildings combined above the ground floor, which include the attached single-car garage and cellar in the photo. That acts as our second fire exit in case of a fire that is now obstructed with a partial petition for an illegal bar. It turns out that the illegal bar is our landlord masked as a tenant doing construction next to major development who hot-wired the buildings 3 times, caused our ceilings to fall in twice, removed our fire exit, and started a fire. At the same time, this same tenant was evacuated at 287 Broadway next to 57 Reade. after our landlord illegally subdivided our electrical, ran the electrical up an elevator shaft at 287 Broadway, failing to flame retard the vent in a residential building. This is now the same tenant in nearly a dozen buildings, all next to major development over the rebuilding of Lower Manhattan after 9/11, where there are 3 buildings with big red X's that were no longer safe to enter, who had 3 accidents, 3 fires, while 3 buildings sit not so mysteriously vacant, all in under 3 years, in a pattern of fraud that began with 3 buildings in 2005, just after the Liberty Bond money fell into place, that now finally extends to 29 buildings in a $200 million fraud scheme for our landlord to sell 26 buildings vacant, boasting a retail component, whether the retail component was legal or complied with code. My question is very simple. Where is this affordable housing meant to go? Our lofts were across the street from the Greenwich Hotel. Someone approved plans for the hotel to go down 3 floors instead of 1, who hit the water line, failing to survey the surrounding landmarks. 385 Greenwich dates back to 1805. 71 North Moore dates back to 1816. The hotel was built on landfill by some of the most relevant journeymen in the country, in my opinion. The 385 portions of these 2 buildings combined above the ground floor was damaged. Our landlord was negligent to repair. This caused our 28 windows to break one by one. Our landlord was negligent to repair. 4 months after the city issued our landlord an illegal certificate of occupancy, falsely claiming our lofts since 1982 were permanently vacant, these kids in this illegal bar, Smith & Mills, started a fire. The fire would have caused the city to investigate. The city would have found that the bar was obstructing our second fire exit for 71 North Moore with a partial petition. The Greenwich Hotel had broken our windows, obstructing our fire escapes for 385 Greenwich, leaving us no way out in case of fire when this illegal bar finally started a fire. 2 weeks later, we were sued when the police tipped them off. I had written Mayor Bloomberg over the fire, accusing me of being Bruce Ratner's sister. I wrote the mayor because his daughter was my next door neighbor at 62 Beach. We were in danger. We were told by Noel Jefferson, an executive member of Community Board 1, who worked for the mayor's office, to write the mayor, Ray Kelly. It turns out BD Hotel's lawyer made up this story on us, trying to put us in breach of lease to turn our lofts into a Soho house. We caught them lying to a judge. 3 Supreme Court judges ruled in our favor. They were forced to describe the premises, the egress, and the fire hazards to the judge too many times to count at Traverse. They failed to serve us notice on any court. They sent a city marshal without a warrant, 8 men threatening to get physical. I'm a socialite. I've never seen my home or anything. Okay. By the grace of God, we are covered by fraud, and we are an intermultiple dwelling. That's exactly correct. Well, very interestingly, thank you for saying so, and it was just the end. Once the case was dismissed against us, we went to Deputy Mayor Corcoran, asking them why in God's name we stood falsely accused of false Department of Building complaints. And we wrote an 8-page complaint to the Landmark Preservation. They caused them to repair the damage. The city claims the damage are MCIs, and now it's tied up in lawsuits.
Sorry.
So the reason that I'm really here is simply to say that it disturbs me that this plan does not speak to preservation.
I think this plan, because you're covered by the loft law, you should go to the loft board.
We
Thank
have,
you.
we have, and we are.
Okay.
We just wanted to speak to this because we feel that we're very fortunate. We don't feel that tenants in East, wherever it is, and Harlem, we've spent $250,000 fighting for our homes.
Thank you.
So we just want to speak to
Okay.
the notion that when these plans go through, these are people's homes. And it shouldn't be that we caught the city falsifying the records 129 times to date. So we think it's something important to say. Somebody approved these plans for the rebuilding of Lower Manhattan after 9/11. we've been fighting every single commissioner in the city.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Alyssa Bishop. Ms. Bishop? Elizabeth Eli? Harry Schwartz? Barry Weinberg?
I'll try really hard to stick to my 4 minutes. I'm Barry Weinberg. I'm a resident of Hamilton Heights and a member of Manhattan Community Board 9's Housing, Zoning, and Land Use Committee. I speak only for myself today, but many of my points are taken from Community Board 9's resolution to disapprove of the ZQA and MIH proposals. I helped draft that resolution, and I'm here tonight to really urge the Commission to read that resolutions from the community boards across the city that contain reasonable and important suggestions and feedback on how to improve those two proposals so that they are acceptable to the vast majority of New Yorkers and will impact their lives in a positive way. These recommended changes should be made to the zoning text proposal, hopefully before it is submitted to the City Council. I think it's safe to say that almost all of us living in the city, including those serving on community boards, support the goals of affirmative portable housing, affordable, flexible, and functional senior living facilities, and varied, nuanced, and appropriate zoning guidelines provide for buildings that enliven pedestrian experiences while meeting the commercial and residential needs of our city. So why then has there been so much opposition from the public and the community boards on both of these two proposals? And the problem lies because the proposals as they stand are not acceptable, and they will have ramifications for years and will be difficult to change. These are the toolkits that you hand to community boards and to all those active in the land use and review process throughout the city, and it's important that when we're making these tools once in a generation, we do it properly and correctly. I want to speak first to MIH. I speak from my own experience representing the community of West Harlem, and according to data from the 2012 American Community Survey, over a quarter of households in our district have combined income and benefits received of $15,000 a year or less. And close to half have combined income and benefits of less than $35,000 a year. It is our strong opinion that the income bands and weights targeted in the MIH proposal regarding the AMI are simply not going to make residences affordable for the vast majority of those in our district, while still opening them up to increased development. We are not anti-development, but we are pro-development that allows our community to stay strong and to grow and welcome new members while retaining those who have really, quite honestly, toughed it out in our community for the past 40, 50 years. And I think that that's pretty simple. I'm sure you've heard a lot about that today. But I want to then also just briefly touch on affordable senior housing, and simply the point that we support affordable senior housing, but we think it only prudent that much as inclusionary housing will be permanent, the affordability requirements for senior housing should also be permanent, because the FAR and height limitation exceptions will also be permanent. And so it does not make sense for us to have only an initial period of 30 years of affordability. Finally, regarding ZQA, which is where many of our serious difficulties with specific aspects of these proposals lie, we think that ZQA has a number of really bad proposals that do not serve any good purpose to the community and really could be excised without meaningfully impacting the goals of either MIH or ZQA. One of these is the provision for rear yard, eliminating rear yard setbacks in R6, R7, R8, R9, and R10 zone in section 23-663, which were formerly required in paragraph A. These setbacks are important for properties abutting lots which have rear yards. We have in Community District 9 this type of zoning in mid-block where there are townhomes with rear yards. And I want to just share the story of something I personally dealt with as a community board member facing the public. There was construction of that passed the LPC of an addition for a fire stair to the back of a townhome near the City College. The townhomes, in fact, owned by City College, is being turned into an academic center. This was allowed by, I believe, both the BSA and the LPC to have a sheer 6-story wall at the lot line completely devastating the next-door garden of the longtime homeowner who'd been there for 30 years, had been part of a safety patrol on the block that kept City College students safe, and that had called the city repeatedly about the dilapidated eyesore that was the City College-owned property that they did not maintain. So we on community boards are going to be the first in the line of fire when something like that happens, when there is a rear lot yard built to the, or when there is a rear wall built to the lot line, when there are sliver buildings going up in mid-blocks, and it's worth it to
Thank you, Mr. Weinberg.
to do it right now.
Thank you, Mr. Weinberg. Questions for Mr. Weinberg? Thank you. Next speaker is Paige Cowley. We'll see. Welcome, Ms. Cowley.
Thank you very much. I'm back because I want you to know this is the hottest ticket in town. And when I got my number, I wasn't going to give it up for anything. I even went to a land use meeting in between just to get revved up.
Maybe you could have sold it, Ms. Cowley. You never know.
Anyway, my name is Paige Cowley. I'm an architect. I'm the co-chair of Land Use Committee for Community Board 7, and I'm here to represent our full community board. And first of all, I want to thank City Planning because during the time of this project, these text amendments were rolled out. You guys and your Commissioner Weisbrod, your staff, has come to at least 3 or 4 meetings to help us understand the ramifications, your goals, and how to actually get this done. Because believe it or not, even though we said no to both the MIH and the ZQA, we really do want affordable housing. And unfortunately, the Upper West Side really doesn't have the space anymore to have it. In fact, your staff is aware that we're in the process now of having to find affordable housing that has been shunted out of developments that were actually earmarked for affordable housing. So tonight, the message that I'm to deliver to you from our chair is one simple word: neighborhoods matter. You have our detailed breakdown of our resolution, but there are 4 areas underneath this that I think, underneath this heading, that I think we can underscore. And from the testimony I heard up until about 3:30 this afternoon, I feel emboldened by other city neighborhoods to reinforce this. The first one is for MIH. It's great. We all want to see this happen. But the one thing that really concerns us is that there's a flawed, it has a huge flaw, and that is with all the promises and goals, there's no real administrative process or procedure that has been outlined that would help us understand how an application comes, except for upzoning, and we're aware that once you let one cow out of the barn, they all follow. So it's a question of the process, the sequence of how submittals are made, the approvals, if and when certain applications can come before the community board. And then, of course, if there are problems and then there's a hardship, we do see a lot of the hardship cases that come before us for 74, 711 and other special permits. But those hardship qualifications really can't apply. Those findings really can no longer apply to housing. And so the PS to this whole administrative process is that we don't believe that the BSA has the expertise or is equipped to decide on matters about housing. That is something that really requires specialist knowledge, and it's not based on, frankly, the bottom line and the loss of income, because how can you ever imagine that? The second one, of course, you've heard all day, and I'm just going to say it again, that applies to both MIH and the ZQA, is the one-size-fits-all. When we first saw this, our committees had a terrible time putting our arms around it because we thought, how could we be making a decision about our neighborhood that is going to affect the Rockaways, Brooklyn Heights, and everywhere else? We just don't know enough about these other communities to actually step in and say, fine, everybody can take this kind of upzoning. So we wanted to know more, and your staff has heard this ad nauseum, about the triggering for MIH and, frankly, the conditions under which this would apply. We see this because we know that the developers are working hard to provide growth for our city, but we have transfer of air rights, no transparency in terms of lot mergers and zoning, and our neighborhoods are really changing, not for the better right now because they don't consider environmental factors. And that's point number 3. And that has to do with, we felt for the ZQA, the environmental impact study was really environmental impact light. It found that there were no adverse effects, but we've seen just with regular development in our district that there's an impact on schools, transportation, even pedestrians are now queuing up to cross at crosswalks because there's not enough time to move people, trucks, buses, cycles, everything converging in our streets. So we felt that these were the 3 most important items that you should reconsider in tonight's, or in the debate going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Cowley. Any questions for Ms. Cowley? Thank you very much. A question from Ms. Levin.
I'd just like to acknowledge that it took until this point in this day that we officially heard from a community board, despite the fact, I will say, they all wrote to us very passionately and very thoughtfully. It's clear that across the city there has been careful consideration of this, but I wanted to thank you for showing up on behalf of a community board.
They would all be here? But,
They would, but they've been through an exhaustive process, and they wrote to us very well.
Thank you so much. I'll send that message because they're 50 of the most devoted people that I've ever had the pleasure of working with. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. And speaking of one of them, Mark Diller.
I'm not alone, by the way.
Maybe. Good evening, Mr. Diller.
Thank you very much. My name is Mark Diller, and I am a member of Community Board 7, Chair Emeritus, which is a title only my mother actually uses, and pinch hitting for our chair, who it takes at least 2 of us to sub for. So thank you for the opportunity to be heard on this. I would be remiss if I didn't open my remarks with a concept of NIMBY, because we've been accused as a community boards of having our, what I believe to be very careful analysis dismissed as simply not wanting it in our backyard. I can't speak for the other 58 community boards, but I'm proud to say that 21% of the supportive and homeless shelter housing in the borough of Manhattan is in our board. And we're very proud to partner with the agencies when called upon in a collaborative way, in a positive way, to work together to make sure that we do that. And there's a meeting tomorrow night to do just that. So the accusation that it's NIMBY is at best unfounded. Picking up a couple of the more important issues that are, I hope, well addressed in our 2 resolutions, one on each of the 2 matters before you. The theme that my colleague Paige just mentioned has some permutations. The idea that neighborhoods matter can be best understood by saying that the goal of affordable housing is to make our communities welcoming of additional folks who can then join in the community. So the character of the community which we're trying to integrate more folks into is as important as making it affordable to them. If we homogenize all of our communities, and this is something that we've been fighting about with the commercial aspects of it and with respect to the housing aspects of it, so that the Upper West Side doesn't become the greatest outdoor suburban shopping mall, is also one of those things that we want to make sure that when we welcome folks into our community, that they're in our community, that they're part of us, and we want that to happen. That's why we see the need for retaining the narrow street distinctions and the opposition to the sliver law and the need for backyards. If there's one thing that's emblematic of the Upper West Side, it's the donuts, and we want to preserve that. I join with many, many other folks in saying that because we're not going to run out of seniors, we shouldn't be running out of senior affordable housing. I'm knocking on that door myself, so please keep that to be permanently affordable. There is a tipping point argument with respect to MIH that is very crucial. there is an opportunity where someone who has a mostly affordable building with the additional height and volume that is permitted under this proposal could actually get to that point where it's worth his or her while to tear down the building and build something else. And going from a 90% affordable building to something that's a little bit bigger but only 20 or 30 or 40% affordable is a net loss. We were told by the wonderful staff who keeps coming to our meetings and taking our abuse and actually answering our questions, that 421A solves this problem. I'm not certain that's correct, but 421A has to be renewed, and has to be renewed in Albany, and we all know what that's about. So if nothing else, we need to airlift the provisions of 421A that are claimed to solve this problem and incorporate them into the zoning resolution, because they're permanent, we know what they say, and we can rely on them. I echo the comments about the appropriate place for hardship applications cannot be the BSA. I'm sorry to say that my recommendation is to put it at HPD, where people actually understand and value this, just in case you didn't have enough to do. And
HPD has rarely been so popular.
I've darkened her door before. The final thought I want to leave you with is the Jack Nicholson quote, what if this is all we get? What if this is as good as it gets? And I'll have to leave it there, except that I'm going
Okay.
This has been sold to us as a floor. But if I'm a developer, and with the developers' lawyers that my colleagues at the bar, who are incredibly good at this, are going to come in and say, I've been given a matrix, I'm picking box number 2. There may be a conversation with the nice folks at City Planning about, now you really need box number 1. But what we really need is to make sure that the affordable housing goes to people, hopefully with families who have children who will need to go to public school and use, please, the public transit, and that the fire department can actually get there. And if the end of the equation is we get the affordable housing and then where are we? Then that's the problem. Kudos, by the way, to HPD staff as well, who has been our partner not just on this matter, but others as well. And thanks to the staff of DCP. Thank you so much.
And I just do want to, because we got a lot of very positive comments about the DCP staff, but the HPD staff has been our partners on this every step of the way. So
yes, indeed. Thank you.
They've been very helpful. Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on this matter? And hearing none, I will say the record is going to be held open for 10 days for comments, particularly on the draft EIS. Cots have been set up upstairs. I do want to thank all the commissioners and staff for really a very long day. And I do want to just acknowledge, I think all of you have met Hope Knight, who has sat through all of this and now is officially a member of this commission, except for the fact that officially appointed by the mayor today after being approved by the council. And I have to say, it's been a very long and grueling day. It's been, I don't know if 13 hours is the longest continuous hearing that city planning has ever had. But I really do want to thank everyone for what I actually thought was a really interesting, high-minded, thoughtful hearing from all sides. So thank you very much. And I particularly want to thank our partner, HPD, and Vicki Bean, particularly for really sitting through this, which is really unnecessary, but really appreciated. Thank you. Thank you all.